All right, well, this is something that I never hear politicians talk about. So you guys actually have a opinion on the war on drugs and how it's actually negatively affected us. And I was wondering if you could contrast your stance on it to especially Joe Biden's.
Well, I mean, I mentioned it briefly. I mean, Biden is largely responsible for the, he's been called the main architect of the federal sentencing guidelines, which, I remember being in law school. I think the year after that passed, I started at the Stanford Law School. And, the whole idea was like, oh, here's this law that's going to, really improve sentencing. And what it did was it created disproportionately harsh sentences for young African-American and Latino kids, basically, because it, treated, crack cocaine differently than powder cocaine, to use one example. And I remember being in class talking about, we didn't think that this law would survive. We thought it wouldn't survive 3 years before it was repealed. There was just like almost unanimity about this opinion. And to think that we're 20 years later is astounding. And to take somebody that's responsible for that, it's one thing to make a mistake. It's another to ignore the mistake, never go back and fix it, and to get to run as a working class guy who cares about poor people, and to think that this is a ticket that is going to be good to African Americans or to troubled youth. I just think it's just another example where you've got deep connections among the candidates with extremely oppressive laws.
Yeah.
I think Nader is a candidate that does a lot of talking related to, the war on drugs, how incredibly wasteful it's been. I think the amount of energy that goes into, people, getting high and just trivialities that rather than focusing on people injuring and hurting other people and things like that. I mean, we're handling a case here in the office for some free speech protesters who were arrested and hassled because they were exercising free speech and protesting against Ringling Brothers when they visited a nearby town. And if you saw the amount of energy these police put into dealing with 4 protesters, I mean, these are cities that have serious crime happening, and they need to be dealing with that. It's just incredible.
Wow.
And, we've got, let's face it, we live in a society that, so many people smoke marijuana, to use an example. The thought that we're still sending police out to try to go after people that are engaged in this conduct and trying to give them jail sentences, it's just incredibly wasteful. We're not winning the war on drugs. We're just, focusing law enforcement efforts in neighborhoods. And I tell you, the war on drugs would come to an end if police went into affluent neighborhoods and spent all their time, searching people for no reason and then charging them with crimes. Yeah.
Yeah, on that note, on the affluent versus the poor, we were talking about before that it's kind of ridiculous when these politicians like Joe Biden adopt populist rhetoric when they're so wealthy and they're so disconnected with poor citizens. And I feel like really the only representation poor people have in the government is through organizations like ACORN, which are under attack right now by the GOP. And I wanted to get your opinion on what's happening with ACORN right now and the very, very hilarious accusations of voter fraud coming from the Republicans right now.
Yeah, I don't even think it's credible. I haven't even paid very much attention to it. I don't think people are falling for it either. So you should say more about it. Yeah.
Well, I just read an article before we went on the air where now Bush is deciding, is debating taking federal funding away from them. And Allison wrote a piece on Huffington Post, which you could explain. kind of a Republican's dream.
Yeah, I mean, essentially everything ACORN stands for, and you both know this, but essentially, finding affordable housing for poor people, registering minorities to vote, it's kind of like the Republicans' wet dream to get rid of these kind of functions that ACORN performs for poor people. So it kind of behooves them to discredit ACORN every chance they get. And, thankfully, I think a lot of people aren't buying into it, but it's so transparent.
But it's a great example, though. If you had an opposition party, in the House and the Senate, this thing just wouldn't be jeopardized at all. It would just be a joke. It's like whatever. But the truth is, because of who the Democrats are, we actually don't know what the outcome of this will be.
Yeah. All right, well, listen, before we wrap up, is there anything, this is a weird question, but is there anything specifically that you want to talk about that, we have a lot of our listeners are young and new to this and, know very little about you and Ralph. Any issues we didn't cover that you'd like to, point out differences?
Well, let me just say this. I want to end on a positive note, which is, I think what we're trying to do is we really do want to create a more democratic and egalitarian society. We want a better country. And the country that we envision is a country where, we give citizens, give our people health care. We give them decent wages. We give them maternity leaves. We give them the things that they ought to have, and that we don't fall for the same old tricks where the corporations, complain that they have no money, or the corporations complain that they can't give their employees these basic rights, all the while giving their CEOs millions of dollar compensation packages, et cetera. That's fundamentally what we want, and we think that, if it was working, if what the Democrats were doing was successful, which is not fighting these issues, capitulating on important civil rights concerns, et cetera, then, if it was working, we'd advocate it. The problem is it's not working. So, there really isn't much of a choice when you go vote. You can either vote for the same old thing that isn't getting us there, or you can start to try to be part of a group of people that want something different. We win even if we don't get 50% plus one. We can win if our numbers get bigger and bigger, and if we can start to show the other political parties that the end is coming for them. And they might escape it this time because they managed to keep us out of the debates. They might escape this time because they've managed to bail out these companies in this economic crisis, in the short term. But all the indications are that the things we're fighting for, we're going to ultimately get, because increasingly the American people are saying, yeah, what is going on? Why can't we have this? We're not asking for anything that we shouldn't have. We're not radicals. We're asking for things that can be delivered. And I just say to your listeners, be good to yourself. Be good to yourself. Feel good when you walk out of that voting booth, having voted for what you want. And that's what we represent. And again, thank you for having me on the show. I think you're both great. You're obviously very intelligent, very informed, and I think you're doing a very good thing. And I appreciate it, dealing with journalists who know what's going on. So thank you for that.
Thanks, man. And stay in touch. We really want to cover you for years to come, and just think that what you're doing is so important, and we think you're going to be a very, very important voice now and in the future. So thanks for calling, man.
Good
All
luck,
right,
everyone.
thank you, guys.
All right, see you, man.
See ya.
Is he gone?
Wait, don't freak out yet.
Because I'm going to freak out. I'm going to freak out.